Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back on the update 1.87 dev server, and it's time to have a look at what I think is the only World War II vehicle when it comes to air to ground that is coming to the game. Everything else just seems like a jet or seems like a top tier tank. So this is the SM.92, it's a rank 4 battle rating 4.0 vehicle, and you'll find it in the Italian tree behind or after its brother, the SM.91, and before the F-84G, which is a nice little place for it. So, what is this aircraft? The best way to describe it is that it is a twin-engined attacker, which has a very similar look to the Bf-109Z, or the F-82, something like that, but it only has a singular cockpit, which is definitely interesting. The guns also are very interesting. It has 3 20mm, 4 12.7mm, and a turret of a 12.7mm as well. So the 3 20mm, you actually have 2 in the center here, sat right here, and then the 4 the 12.7s, you have 2 in the underbelly of each of the, prop hubs, I suppose you'd call them, and then the last 20mm is actually encased in this Daimler-Benz DB605A1. You can see it right here. So, it's an interesting configuration of guns all over the place. Oh, and of course, the turret 12.7 is sat right back here. So overall, you have a ton of ammunition, you have a ton of secondary armament options, and you are insanely heavy in this thing, or at least that's what it feels like. But with the DB605s, you have a ton of power behind you, so therefore you can at least move around. Also, guess who's controlling that one wonderful 12.7? Yes, there isn't just one guy in here, there are 2 guys in this cockpit, and I'm sure the second guy doubles as some form of navigator. And the modifications are, well, there's tons of them, I think is the best way of saying it. You have the offensive 12.7. I personally like air targets or tracers, mainly tracers on the Breda Safats. And then on the 20mm, well, it's an MG151, so you can take absolutely anything and it will annihilate everything in front of you. And then the 12.7 turret, I personally like to take the universal just because there's a bit more incendiary in it. The secondary weapons is where it comes alive though. You have 650s, 6 100s, 2 250s, or 2 500s. So you can get some very large bombs under the center of this aircraft, and since they are under the center, it means that it won't screw with your flight characteristics too much once they are launched or once you are launched. On top of this, at 4.0, it's actually quite a nice BR to be when we talk about ground forces. 4.7 with the M4 Tipo, or if you just want to do 4.0, you could do the Breda 501 and then a bunch of tank destroyers. So there is an opportunity there to actually run the SM.92, and also there's an opportunity at 6.7 with the lineup you have here to run it as well, since there isn't really competition for the attacker or the bomber area for the SM.92 in that little area. So for me, I'm happy to see it in the game. It definitely offers something new, which we haven't really seen before, and that is something that you want to see. You want to see a vehicle which is different, which is not really changing the meta, but something that gives you a different way of looking at stuff. Really, you want to put me against B-29s? No, thank you. God damn. And with the SM.92, it represents something different. First of all, it represents something World War II, which is definitely different compared to a lot of stuff that we see coming in this update. It also represents the fact that it doesn't have a standard way of looking. It's a twin engine with the cockpit on one side, and this is the cockpit, by the way. It is a placeholder. Oh dear. And you have the lad back there. So this might be one of the first fighter cockpit placeholders we have. And also the aimer. My god, it takes up so much of the screen. I feel bad for the pilot. He definitely doesn't have a good view out of that thing. But what I personally found from the using of the Bf-109Z is it all really depends on how good the rudder is on machines like this. If the rudder is alright, then these machines won't have any issues. If the rudder isn't, then these machines are going to have issues. On top of this, we also, we also have something we have to think about. Okay, let's get that lag out of the way. Is the elevator. Now, since there is a big fat turret sat in the middle of the elevator, and it can really only shoot directly behind it and nowhere else. Like, it has such a limited view. I have no idea why this is even a thing, or why they decided that this had to happen. Maybe they were worried about stuff being behind it, but still, there must be a better option. At high speeds, if you look at the P-38, or if you look at anything which is this kind of style, the one thing you have to think about is how good's the elevator at pushing you around. Now, the SM.92 has huge wings, so at high altitudes it should be able to turn very well. But because it's at 4.0, the majority of aggressive tactics that you will encounter will not always happen at high altitudes. Instead, they will happen much lower, around the 3,000 to 4,000 mark. So, if the SM.92 can set itself up in a situation where it's at like 6,000, maybe 5,000 meters, I can see this thing doing really well. I mean, look, when you have it in the hangar, it definitely doesn't look this big, does it? It doesn't feel that big, but in-game, you can definitely tell its size. Very long, very wide, very dangerous. Another thing I found is that shooting consecutively for a while does actually put off the balance of the plane, because of the fact that you don't have that extra 20mm in the center. What you end up with is the plane trying to chuck itself slightly to the right, and this is generally not a bad thing, because you can self-correct it, but if you're not paying attention, especially in something like Simulator, you're gonna have a few issues after the initial burst, because your aim is going to be set off, right? Your aim is not going to be able to line up as it normally does, because you're going to be cockeyed. Now, you get a ridiculous amount of ammunition when it comes to the Braiders and when it comes to the cannons. So, because of that, you're never going to have to worry about ammo. You're going to have to be much more worried about getting shot out the air than really anything else. And also, with that said, because you're such a big target, even though you may not think it, a lot of people are going to be able to hit you when you are unsure if they're going to or not. So, you're going to have to make sure they're not get hit. I don't know, I'm trying to figure out a better way to say it. But with these large aircraft, once you get wing damage or once you get tipped, you're pretty much done. Because, as I've talked about before, the issues with the elevator and the rudder, if they ever get hit, you know, goddamn, you are already screwed. But a lot of monoplanes, which are just single-tailed, they can get away with it. They can get away with a little bit of damage, but with this, it is not the case that happens. You can see it does not like pushing the elevator the opposite way of where it should be, and it's trying its hardest. I'm just using the mouse right now, I'm not actually using the keyboard at all. It's trying its hardest to use the elevator instead of the rudder to line up stuff, which is fine, but it's something you're definitely going to have to take and get used to, because obviously it's normally a bunch of different factors that goes into it, that goes into setting up a kill, or setting up a position, I should say. The dive on it, we'll actually have a look, because I'm curious about the dive. Looking at the general statistics that this thing has, you have a machine which climbs really well. You have a machine with a lot of powerful engines behind it and a lot of ammunition going for it. So the way I would see it is, if you're going to use this in a fighting capacity, it should be used in a boom and zoom roll. So finding out how fast it can dive is incredibly important. So we've easily hit 800, we're reducing speed at 820, and it can pull out of a 10G. Okay, well that's fine. That's good enough. And, just remember, 4-0. So a lot of the time, you're probably going to be fighting in that 4-3 area with the BF-109s on your team, and also the C-205s, C-202s. That's another thing. If you want to use this as a direct fighter, it's very hard to make the case to use this over the actual dedicated Italian fighters in the tree. It's much better to just use them as a fighter. So the secondary roles of the attacker, you know, with the bombs and stuff, definitely makes it more usable. I'm just wondering if its role has already been filled, in the fact that a lot of the Italian fighters now actually have bombs attached to them. So maybe this thing could be surplus to requirement. I personally am going to really enjoy it. I'm personally going to fly it a lot. I'm going to make sure to modify it when it finally comes out. But I'm just wondering if it'll be the same as like the SM.91, which I didn't really enjoy going through. It wasn't a fun experience to grind through because of its lack of engine power at the start. I don't think the SM.92 will have the same issue though. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.